Celebrities, they're just like us. But what would you have to see to truly be convinced that the life of a celebrity is no different than your own? My name is Walker, and this is the Recap Episode, a podcast where I use social science to recap and analyze reality TV shows, exploring all-time favorites and exposing shows that you've never heard of. In this episode, I'm covering a show that I've been excited about ever since I started this podcast. MTV's The Osbournes, a docuseries show that follows the Osbourne family just after moving to Beverly Hills in autumn of 2001 and documenting all of the chaos and comedy and hijinks that ensues with their high-profile family. So I called this show a docuseries, which, if you're more familiar with more contemporary shows, the most direct comparison to this would be something like a Keeping Up with the Kardashians or a Don't Be Tardy, something like those shows, where we're following the same group of people over an extended period of time, and the show is giving us interesting events that happened to them during that period of filming. This contrasts a bit with what we call like a structured reality show, which is where you take people and put them in a specific situation and then document that. MTV was really good at that format leading up to this because they had The Real World, which started in 92, and by this point, by the airing of The Osbournes, The Real World was actually mid-airing season 11. And in that show, they take strangers, make them live in a house together, and they document what happens. But in this show, it's just cameras joining the Osbourne family and seeing what goes down. Our main cast here, of course, we have the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, from the band Black Sabbath. We have his wife, SHARON, who's a music manager. She manages Ozzy. She's worked in the music industry for a long time. At this point in the show, I believe Ozzy and SHARON had been married for 20 years, if I remember correctly. We also have two of their children. They have 3 kids together. Kelly Osbourne is the middle daughter of theirs, and Jack Osbourne is their youngest son. Their oldest daughter, Amy, during production initially went kind of back and forth on whether or not she wanted to be a part of the show. You can still see her in some clips that they included, but she ultimately declined, so she's actually like blurred out. But there's like a person there, and you're like, who is this? That's Amy. She decided not to be in the show. She just didn't want it attached to her image. She wanted to remain a bit more private, and to the point where she's kind of like spoken out against the family after the show and kind of been like, why did you do that? So how did we even get here? Well, the Osbourne family was actually featured on an episode of MTV's Cribs, the show where they go to celebrities' homes and just kind of get a house tour and document what their houses look like. After they had filmed the episode of Cribs with the Osbourne family, some of the producers at MTV realized that, like, hey, this was a lot of fun, this was very entertaining, and a few of them had also been meeting with SHARON Osbourne for various things. After listening to stories SHARON had been sharing about the chaos and the funny things that have happened inside their home and with their family, some of the producers were like, hey, can we actually just keep filming? And I think I saw them mention somewhere that, like, well, the plan was only to do it for like maybe a month or so, and then they produced 4 seasons of a show from it. So the show was filmed from October 2001 to March 2002, and then immediately started airing after filming was wrapped. I have some fun and interesting facts to share about like the production that I got from an article on Vice, which was very helpful, called An Oral History of the Making of MTV's The Osbournes. The first episode of the show shows the family moving into their new Beverly Hills home, which is this large mansion-style home that you'd probably expect for them to have, given their celebrity status. The production crew, to be able to actually like film this family at all times and be able to get all the footage they want to make the show they are planning to make, need to find a way to be around as much as possible. So what they ended up doing was actually using the housekeeper's quarters as the like control room headquarters area. In terms of actually making the show happen, MTV had some different ideas about what they wanted to see as the final product. Initially, they wanted something that was more like The Real World, because that had been successful, again, airing season 11 at the time of this show, aired, so season 10, while the show is being filmed. And off the success of that, MTV was like, well, can we make something similar? And I got, this quote from Jeff Stilson, who was one of the MTV executive producers at the time. He said that the network told him, we don't like the sitcom feel. We want to play heavy metal underneath, right? Harkening to Ozzy being part of Black Sabbath. And Stilson says, well, as you can imagine, that was just horrible. It was awful. MTV wanted to make the show more like the real world because that's what they knew. However, the showrunners here, their objective was to make it the opposite. The executives in charge wanted there to be a story, but there's a rule in reality television. You tell the audience what they're going to see, you show it, and then you tell them what they just saw. We threw that out. Which is true. You want to make a good reality show, just very much lay out exactly what happens and show them, and then briefly talk about it. Here, everything is just so, off the walls and non-formulaic. But it works really, really well, and I think most of that comes down to, the dynamics of the family and the cast of the show. Compared to more contemporary shows, they had a lot more time to film this one. Again, October to March is a long time of collecting footage. It came out to about 3 weeks of filming for each episode. Season 1 only had 10 episodes, which is the only season I'm covering in this episode of the podcast. But, they had thousands of hours of footage that they then had to trim down into these 20-minute episodes. And the production crew, the producers and editors, they had to figure out, how are we going to take all this stuff and make it into an entertaining show? And the route they ended up choosing, and it helped that they had 2 writers on staff, story beat producers, whatever you want to call them, who had worked in other comedies and had experience with doing so, and then the film crews themselves had experience in working in documentary, so it was easy for them to understand how to film things. They did have to change their behaviors a little bit to be able to kind of oh, something is happening, let's all rush there to film it, rather than just sort of running all the time and expecting what to film. But they wanted to produce a show that was, lighthearted and entertaining, had the unscripted nature, but also had a bit of the sitcom-y feel that we like, but not in the same way as other shows that were airing at the time. And so what they did is they really took all this footage and hodgepodged it and stitched it together and collaged it. And it's an entertaining show, but wow, it's very chaotic and difficult to parse any sort of a timeline or chronology of what's happened here. But I think it worked out really well, and it's a very enjoyable show. I have some experience with this show. I haven't watched all of it before, but I do have specific memories of watching some of it when I was a kid. Either when it was first airing between 2001 and 2005 for the 4 seasons, or when they were doing reruns. I definitely remember seeing some episodes. I have distinct memories of my childhood of looking at a TV and hearing Ozzy go, "SHARON!" So I've been excited to get to this one. It's one that I've kind of fondly remembered very weird pastiches of in my memory. And now that I'm watching it all the way through, and I'm like, yes. And this is entertaining. And maybe this is where it all began for me. Who knows? So, like I mentioned, there's a lot that goes on in this show, and there's no single coherence or through line or even consistent timeline in this entire thing. It's all just sort of stitched together so that each episode maybe has some overarching plots, or they have 2 to 3 minor plots. The episodes are only 20 or 22 minutes long. They fit into a 30-minute time slot. It can be confusing if you're trying to do what I'm doing and figure out what happens, what events occurred, and keeping track of things. But if you're just picking up the show for the first time and you're just jumping in on episode 4, they've made this show in a way that is super easy to just jump right in and find it enjoyable. And if there's anything important that you need to know, they'll fill you in on it. They'll remind you. So that makes it difficult for me to do a proper recap, because if I try to sit down here and explain episode to episode everything that went on, none of it would make sense. I would be jumping all over the place, and it would just sound like me rambling for however long, potentially sounding like Ozzy does half the time in this show. So instead, what I'm going to do is kind of discuss some overarching plots, and then I'll go through each episode and kind of just lay out, here's what we focused on, here's what we spent the most time with. Because really, unless the episode is about a whole thing, for example, one of the episodes is about fighting with the neighbors, you don't spend a lot of time with an individual story beat or in a particular scene anytime that we were in a scene for longer than like 5 minutes is surprising. So, for season 1, we have some... I kind of listed out 4 overarching things that we come back to constantly throughout the season. So, one of the big ones is the pets. They have so many dogs and 2 cats, and they're constantly getting on everyone's nerves, particularly Ozzy, and dealing with the other members of the family not like properly taking care of them, but also just hijinks that animals get into, especially when you have a lot of them living together in such a big house with this specific family. Another one is Jack and Kelly's kind of like sibling combativeness. We get to see a lot of Jack and Kelly fighting, both physically and then also them just being like upset with each other and yelling and having arguments. And they're 15, 16, and then become 16, 17 over the course of this first season. So you can imagine how 2 teenagers who are 1 year apart and are related act with each other, especially when they both have like very strong and big personalities and honestly take after their parents in that regard extremely well. Another one is Ozzy's leg injury, which also goes with the 4th one that was listed out, is a tour. Ozzy goes on tour with Black Sabbath part of the way through the filming of this season. It's kind of cut up all over the place. It's hard to figure out like where in the tour are we in this episode or in this scene, because they cut back and forth a lot throughout each episode and all the episodes. During this tour, Ozzy ends up like injuring his leg and breaking his shin, and it's kind of strung across a couple of episodes, and we kind of see him struggling to deal with it, doing very much the thing of like, oh, I don't need rest, I don't need to like take care of it, or I'm not going to do anything stupid. And then it cuts immediately to footage of him jumping around during a show, and then he's like, well, my leg hurts, and you're like, yeah. So for individual episodes, episode 1, our very first episode, it's focusing mostly on moving into the house. We get to see a lot of, unboxing stuff, things moving around, talking to movers, setting up the house. It's our intro, so we get kind of a characterization of each of the family members. Ozzy here, I've read this in a lot of reviews and a lot of people talking about the show and seeing like comments on YouTube and Reddit and other social media platforms about this show. Ozzy in this first episode is when he shifts from the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, into that's literally just everyone's dad right there on TV. There's a great scene in this first episode where he is struggling to use the new TV that's in the house because he can't get the remote to work. He has to call his son Jack to come help him, and this is the moment where everyone's like, oh, that's just my dad. He can't figure out how to get the TV to work, needs his kid to come help. They do this a few times throughout the show. Like in the second episode, they do the same thing with a vacuum. Ozzy and SHARON can't figure out how to turn his vacuum on. Kelly comes and figures it out for them. The rest of episode 1, the other big things, like I said, moving into the house, Ozzy struggling with the TV is honestly like a major plot point in this episode. The other big thing is we get to see Ozzy performing on The Tonight Show, and we get some characterization of Ozzy here, both observing him and what SHARON tells us as well, in kind of like a talking to us confessional-esque thing that, Ozzy loves to perform, but he's not big with like talking and interviewing and going on these shows. So we get to see that kind of switch in dynamic where he's kind of like nervous and not really wanting to participate, but he's also like still friendly to his fans and the people who like him and like his music. But then when you get to see him perform, you can tell like that's when he's in his element. He loves that part. But he also hates watching himself on TV. And there's a scene here where he's sitting with their security guard, Michael, and he's watching his performance from The Tonight Show the previous night. And Ozzy's just sort of like staring directly at it. You can tell, gears are turning in his head, and he's kind of like watching it. Maybe he's critiquing himself. Maybe he's just watching it in pain because he doesn't like watching himself. Michael, the security guard, is just like sitting there with a kind of like half confused expression on his face because he can't, maybe he's not like enjoying what he's watching. I did find out later there was a show that was made in 2024 called The Osbournes, The Basement Tapes, where the family came together to rewatch episodes of the show and discuss it with kind of a moderator who was a comedian who did a pretty okay job. That was the first time Ozzy had ever even watched this show because he hates himself watching himself so much. But it was revealed during that first episode of the Basement Tapes, when they watched this first episode, that Michael is security guard. They all loved him. So funny, though, he never understood a single thing Ozzy said. And I'm not going to be honest, sometimes I don't understand the things Ozzy say. I have to have the subtitles on and hope that the subtitles are correct. And this is what I mean, like, that was the first episode. There's, like, 3 different things happening. Moving in, Ozzy on the Tonight Show, Ozzy struggling with the TV. I think we also got footage of Kelly and Jack fighting during this. There was also a scene of, like, Jack and Ozzy attaching a bayonet knife to a rifle that Ozzy has. Sharon talking about the pool, stuff with some of the pets. Like, there's so much going on, and it's all crammed into 22 minutes. It's at least, again, very entertaining, and you will not be bored, because there's always something happening, and they're always switching to something. And they're not going to stay on something for a long time unless it's entertaining and engaging. I love it. I like the chaotic energy. This is my kind of show, I will say. Episode 2, this one is all about their pets. I will say each of the episodes actually does have like an episode title. It's not just like episode 1, episode 2. Episode 1 is called There Goes the Neighborhood. There's kind of this overarching thing in the show about, like, this is not your typical American family, because it's Ozzy Osbourne and his wild family members. So, there goes the neighborhood for when they move into the quaint Beverly Hills neighborhood. Episode 2 is called Bark at the Moon. It's focusing all about the pets. Again, they have lots of dogs and a couple cats. Shout out to there's so many pets, and I don't even think I can remember all their names. Minnie, Lola, Lulu, I think. There's the gay one, Martini. That's what Sharon says. I love this show. There's a great scene here in the beginning where Kelly calls in from the pet store, calling Sharon. Sharon comes over and she's like, Ozzy, Kelly's calling. She wants there's a cat at the store, and Ozzy's like, absolutely not. This one, the main thing, it's just dealing with the pets. So it's lots of footage of, like, the pets destroying furniture. It seems that, like, what Ozzy complains about the most is that no one seems to want to, like, take care of the pets properly. Like, no one's getting out and walking them and taking them out. So as a result, they're using the house as their bathroom. And so all these carpets and chairs and everything are constantly being peed on. Nice footage of their bulldog Lola just shitting on the floor in one scene. Ozzy, a man of his time and a true contemporary, at one point when he sees one of the dogs piss on the carpet, he goes, "It's that terrorist," and he points at the dog. "It's part of Bin Laden's gang." This is filmed October 2001. It's a very good, like, look into the early 2000s as well, I'll say. Especially since it does focus on this celebrity family. You get a lot of, like, celebrity adjacency going on. Mandy Moore is just, like, around the house because she's Jack's friend. Jack was also friends with Elijah Wood and his sister, so they're just there in some of the episodes. I saw things from the production who were talking about, like, they'd come over and they'd talk with Sharon about the show and work on some stuff, and she'd be like, "Oh, I want you to meet someone," and it's just like Elton John. He's just there. Most of this episode, again, the dogs. There's a minor piece about Jack and Kelly going out. Sharon tells Kelly not to drink, and she's like, "Well, I'm the designated driver." And then it's immediately cut with, like, the cops pulling her over, and you're like, "Oh no, what's going on?" No, it's fine. Kelly just got a ticket for not doing a complete stop at a stop sign. Although this does turn into, like, a big thing of, like, everyone in the family being like, "Kelly, you're going to get your license taken away." The kind of cherry on top for this episode, what it all builds to by the end. And this, like, there's debate about whether or not this event was staged by production or how it happened properly. Some people claim it was, some people claim it wasn't. Sharon, to help out with the dogs, allegedly calls a, quote, dog therapist, as Ozzy keeps calling her, or a trainer, as the Chiron on screen called her, Tamara, to help them out with the dogs. And she's trying to do some, like, well, here's how you train them. Here's how you work with them. And she's been real friendly with the dogs. And you can definitely tell, maybe she wasn't briefed, but she keeps reacting every time one of the family members looks at the dog and is just like, "Fuck off." Which they say a lot. And, there's a really great remark from Ozzy here when Tamara is, like, working with Sharon and Ozzy's in the background. And Ozzy looks just directly at the camera and he's like, "What has my life come to? I have a therapist for my dog." Which is very California. This episode, closes out very perfectly with Ozzy discovering a brand new cat that has been added to the crew. And this is one of the moments where it gets kind of twisted and out of order, and you're kind of noticing things, because one of the first things I noticed in this episode is that Jack and Kelly had completely different hairstyles. Kelly in the first episode had this nice hot pink hair, and in this episode she has a red faux hawk. And then Jack had this curly growing out pseudo fro thing going on in the first episode. And in this episode he has a shaved mohawk kind of thing going on. And so I'm like, huh? And then when we get into episode 3, they're back to their original haircuts. So this is where I started picking up. I was like, okay, this show is kind of out of order. So who knows if that cat was truly added to the family at the quote end of episode 2, or if that got picked up somewhere earlier and we're seeing things all mixed around. It works well for this show. I think if it was a different family or a different show, I would not like the sort of randomness and jumping around as much, but it makes this show entertaining. And as I get to a later point, it fits in very well with what I like to do when I watch reality shows and what I do for the podcast. Episode 3 is called For the Record. This one, 3 big things in this one. For the Record, because Ozzy's releasing a new record and he goes to New York City to do some promotional work. Mostly that's just us getting to see footage of Ozzy interacting with fans, which you can tell he totally loves doing. And it's his element. And it's very... I don't want to call it cute, but it's very cute. There's some minor stuff about Jack going on a camping school trip, and Sharon and Melinda, who is Sharon's assistant and Jack's quote nanny. I think she's also technically the nanny for Kelly, but we see her more interacting with Jack. She's the one who's kind of making sure he's ready and going to school and driving him around most of the time. Sharon and Melinda are talking about you think Jack is depressed? And she's like, no, Jack's just tired because he's staying up till 4 a.m. every day. He just needs to go to bed on time. Melinda's great. She's not there that often, but when she is, she's pretty fun. And, you can tell she'd been with the family for a while and is used to them, because every time one of them, tells her to fuck off, she just gives it right back to them. The other main thing for this episode is Kelly's birthday party. This is at least a point where I was able to, establish a chronology. Kelly's birthday is towards the end of October, which you're at least able to figure out by looking at the episode, because there's, Halloween decorations up and pumpkins and everything. But then I can at least tell you that piece of this episode was filmed in late October. Episode 4 is another episode, kind of like episode 2, where it was all about the dogs. Episode 4 is all about one singular thing, and it's about the Osbourne family beefing with their neighbors. This makes, again, the chronology confusing, because in the last episode we knew it was around Halloween, and then in this episode we start seeing, a Christmas tree and decorations in the background of shots, and you're like, oh, we're at Christmas already. I found out that some of the scenes for this later were filmed after Christmas, which made me even more confused. But in this one, they have some neighbors that live right next door who, ironically enough, are staying up late and playing new music outside and being a nuisance and making too much noise for the Osbourne family. This is where we get to see Sharon's... Sharon is often called the original momager, and if you don't know where that term came from, it's the term often used for Kris Jenner, the matriarch of the Kardashian Jenner families, because she is the one who is the manager for all of those women in those families, and Rob. But people call Sharon the original momager, because she's a mom, she is a manager, and often those two things come together and work together hand in hand. And while she's extremely professional, and you can tell she does her managerial work excellently and exceptionally, she also has this other side to her that you can tell. This is why she fits perfectly with Ozzy. She has her own brand of wildness and getting crazy, which I love. Fully respect. All respect here to the members of this family. In this episode, Sharon is the one leading the charge against these bad neighbors and wanting to get them to stop this, give them a piece of her mind. She develops all these schemes this whole episode. She's like, I'm going to go over and I'm going to pretend to be very posh English and be and complain. Or she's like, and she's like, maybe I'll invite them over and poison them or something. At one point, the neighbors and Sharon have a full-on, like, argument fight in the middle of the night. And Sharon keeps doing this thing where she's like, come over and talk. Come over. Yeah, just come over and talk. How about you come over tomorrow and talk? Very funny bit where she's like, well, we're a very religious family and we go to church every Sunday. We go about 1, so if you could come at about noon. And she immediately turns around and she's like, Kelly, I told them we go to church. There's a very fun little interlude here. Sharon met some of the, like, other moms in the neighborhood, which are very, like, suburban white women. And we got a little, like, footage of them talking to the cruise cameras about, like, meeting Sharon and knowing of Ozzy. We get, after Sharon has this, like, fight and argument with the neighbors the night before, which I note here is the longest continuous scene we've seen so far in the show. We immediately cut that to some of the suburban moms out doing, like, their morning power walk. And then that's stitched next to Ozzy kind of walking around silently and cleaning everything. She does a lot. This episode kind of reaches a peak and a climax when one night the neighbors are out singing and playing the guitar. Sharon and Jack go out and start making fun of them because they're bad and also annoying. They decide to fight back by blasting death metal out their windows towards the neighbors. Kelly is not with this. She's just trying to sleep. Ozzy is passed out cold during all this. Jack goes over to actually, like, start arguing with the neighbors. Kelly, here she's saying, this is all just going to antagonize the neighbors. It's going to provoke them. Then Jack goes and, like, throws a ham off of a balcony at the neighbors. Sharon goes and picks up the ham and fully throws it over the fence. During this, we get a very funny, Kelly's like, telling Sharon what the neighbors were saying. She's like, oh, they're making fun of Dad, calling you a crazy whore. I love Sharon. She looks at Kelly, sort of at the camera, and just goes, well, they're right about that one. All this sort of fighting and poking at the bear gets the cops called on them, but Sharon had already called the cops many times before, so they're kind of on her side, it appears, on the Osbournes family side, and they're like, hey, we can't do anything, just, like, stop pestering them and ignore them, and, like, that's the best we can do, which is not good enough for anyone in the Osbourne family. And the episode ends out with them all throwing stuff over the wall into the neighbor's yard, and they were just throwing, like, food and bread and stuff, but Ozzy goes and, like, throws a big chunk of wood. He goes through the, like, tree barrier, which isn't, like, a real barrier. You can step through the plants, right? And he, like, throws something. They overlaid a sound of, like, glass breaking on top of this to make it seem like Ozzy threw something and broke a window. To the point that when Ozzy had, like, seen a brief clip of this for the first time, he actually thought he broke their window. And he's like, you can't put that on TV. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get sued. And they're going to press charges. And they're like, no, Ozzy. We're good. we added that in. It's fake. Episode 5 is called Tour of Duty. Our big things here is 1, Ozzy getting in shape for tour. This is when the stuff with the tour starts. We didn't really have any of that the first 4 episodes. Now we're getting tour information. We get some fun stuff here of Ozzy in drag, filming a music video or some promotional stuff. Also, them preparing for one of the shows of the tour. I believe this is the Black Christmas tour, because it's the end of the 2001 year, and so they were doing this, like, demonic Santa stuff with the set design for the stage for the shows. So we get to see Ozzy testing out this, like, giant sleigh that he's supposed to ride around in that shoots fire and stuff. But then we also get to see Ozzy very much, he's a very creative person. We get a lot of, like, scenes of him drawing and working on, like, art. And he definitely has an opinion about, like, his stage presence. During one of these this like sound check, effects check with the sleigh, they also reveal, like, some pyrotechnics and some fireworks. He's like, okay. And then Sharon's very amused by these, like, bubbles that are floating around afterwards. And he's like, bubbles? I'm the Prince of Darkness. That's not very evil. He wants the bubbles cut. And so we get a few things of, like, Ozzy being a diva, but also not really. Of him being like, I won't do it, I'm not doing that. We also get a minor scene here of, on the tour, him learning that he is scheduled to do 2 shows back to back. And he's like, I'm not doing that, I can't do that, I'm old, I can't do that anymore. He's like, Sharon, I won't do it. And it's immediately cut with him in Albuquerque at the next show, being like, Let's go! Episode 6, called Trouble in Paradise. This is all just kind of about conflicts around the house, within the family. Mostly Jack's attitude, Ozzy dealing with one of the cats. This is when we start seeing things about him being injured, because he suddenly has a boot on in this episode, like one of the black Velcro boots they give you if you have a break or a bad sprain or you're like recovering from foot problems. And the whole time I'm like, why does he have a boot? Where did this come from? I have no info about this. I fully accepted the show is like out of order at this point. So I'm like, I guess hopefully I'll figure it out later. This one's very interesting because the family decides to have a private family meeting. So normally there's a bunch of cameras they have set up around the house, but they also have one or two crew members following each of the family members with a camera at any given time to get multiple angles and footage of the things that are involved in the events that are going down. But the family wanted to have a private family meeting, so they actually went into one of the den rooms, one of the rooms of the house, and none of the human crew members were there, but this room they were in did have 3 cameras planted in it. So we still got to see the family meeting, even though they wanted it to be more private. And this family meeting largely came down to SHARON and Ozzy getting more frustrated with Jack and Kelly having a lot of friends over at like weird, odd, insane hours of the morning, and this, making it so that SHARON and Ozzy can't sleep. They've got all these people coming in and out. Their house is a revolving door. All fair complaints. Kelly and Jack try to, argue back a bit here that, they're not normal kids. They were not raised like normal kids are. No kid was raised like them, like going on tour, And SHARON and Ozzy are trying to tell them, was like, well, we wanted to take you on tour as kids all the time because we wanted the family to be together. We didn't want us to be away and you to just be left behind with whoever is helping you out, hired by the family to do so. And so it ends in a kind of, storm off from Jack, and nothing really conclusive with any of them. It just kind of ends. But it's very interesting and very kind of... It felt like watching it, I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here. It felt weird to have it in there. But, ultimately I think SHARON was an executive producer, so she wouldn't have let anything be aired on the show that was going to be bad. So I guess they felt it was okay enough to keep in. And I think it does go a long way in kind of like selling. Like, this family is just your normal family. Like, yeah, the dad is Ozzy Osbourne, Prince of Darkness. But they have the same problems every other family does. Which is kind of like a central thesis of this show, if you will. Episode 7 focuses entirely on Thanksgiving. If you remember back in episode 4, that episode was filmed after Christmas. So, more timeline shenanigans. This is Thanksgiving, which was kind of cute. It goes pretty well. And then the rest of this episode is SHARON, Jack, and Kelly going to meet Ozzy in New York to surprise him for his birthday. There's some inklings and some things earlier in the episode where Ozzy tells them, he's like, I'm getting tired of you right now. There's been lots of arguing and yelling, and he's mad at SHARON for some reason. He's like, I just want to break from you all. I'm going to have my birthday. I don't want to see you. But this family clearly loves each other. So Jack, SHARON, and Kelly go to surprise him for his birthday. We get some funny stuff of them like hiding in the hotel room, and SHARON's like, if he sees me or sees us and there's no like public crowd around, it'll be bad. She's like, we need to make sure the first time he sees us there's other people around. But they end up surprising him at his birthday dinner that was going to be with a bunch of band and crew from the band members and their friends. And you can tell that he's like enamored that his family came to surprise them, and he really loves and appreciates that they're there, even when he told them that he didn't want to see them, which Kelly fully called out. Kelly, in some episodes, she's like, listen, he always goes on tour, and he's like, yeah, I'm getting rid of you, and then 3 days later, he's calling because he wants to just talk with us, which he 100% did. There was a point where he's on the tour, and he just calls up Kelly, and she's like, what's up? He's just like, how are you doing? He just wants to talk. Again, he becomes everyone's dad. Episode 8, the main thing here is Jack has a, quote, friend that stays with him, and this causes a lot of problems. There's a lot of, like... Ozzy, at first, he's like, who the hell even is this guy? Jason Dill, he's like a famous skateboarder of the time. But it eventually gets to the point where Jack and Ozzy and SHARON are like, he's got to go. He's got to get out. So they make Jack kick out his friend. The other thing in this episode is there's some dog stuff with Lola. There's a very, very silly romantic montage of Jack and Lola, like, in the swimming pool that has this, like, romantic music cut over it. It's got black and white footage of them interacting that was filmed in, like, other episodes. When you gotta fill time, you find creative ways to fill time. And honestly, this was a very fun, creative way to do that. Episode 9. Now we're actually at Christmas. This is very fun. There's some of their extended families there. Ozzy's oldest son from his previous marriage prior to SHARON shows up. It's nice. Amy is around because it's Christmas time. There's a scene where they're all getting ready to have, like, a Christmas meal together. And it slowly devolves into arguing and fighting, and Kelly leaves the table, and they're still yelling at her from downstairs. Jack is still kind of antagonizing her. At one point, it hadn't quite broken out into a full fight yet, and Ozzy goes like, oh, okay. 25 minutes past the hour, we're getting ready for the family brawl. There's a scene here where we do get to see, the cohesion and the close-knitness of this family. Kelly has some friends come over, and they're, like, hanging out with Ozzy and SHARON. It's like Kelly's friend, Ozzy, SHARON, and then Kelly's friend's sister and cousins, who, those three are just kind of there, and you can tell they're very awkward and don't know what to do. And 100% they just tagged along because they were going to get the opportunity to see Ozzy Osbourne. But Kelly's friend makes a comment about... Ozzy has some, like, red color in his hair at this point. And she's like, Ozzy, I don't like the red. You should go back to the black. And everyone just immediately turns on her, including Kelly. So it's very nice to... This family loves each other very dearly. And they're gonna, like, stick up for each other and not take shit from anyone else that says anything about their family. The other major thing in this episode is Jack gets a knife as a Christmas present from a friend, but they don't want him going out and getting in trouble and then having a knife on him while he's getting in trouble. So they take it away, unsuccessfully at first, but then they finally manage to get it from him and keep it from him. The 10th episode is just called Dinner with Ozzy. And when I was heading into this one, I was like, what is this even going to be? Like, the previous one was called A Very Ozzy Christmas. Makes sense. Get Stuffed. I knew that was going to be about Thanksgiving before it even started, because what else was it going to be about? Dinner with Ozzy? I was like, what is this? And this episode is kind of like its own half recap of the first season. There's a little bit of new extra stuff added in. But the focus of this episode is Ozzy sitting down, having this, like, multi-course fancy meal, and basically being interviewed. And he's talking about his background, the family, what he thinks of Kelly and Jack, and parenting them, his lifestyle and what it means to be, like, a father, an atypical one at that, and what is the typical American family? Are they that at all? All these kind of things. It was interesting. I was like, oh, this is new. So mostly it's just learning about getting Ozzy's perspective on things. There's a pretty fun scene in here where one of the cats is in one of the bedrooms and they're struggling to get, like, a hold of it. It's, like, agitated. And Ozzy's trying to, like, take care of it. Everyone's just, like, screaming every time it jumps around and moves. And at one point, SHARON, like, pranks Ozzy in the middle of all this by just, like, screaming randomly. Pretty good scene. Literally just, like, slapstick hijinks in real life. So what do I have to say about this show? Well, a lot. Obviously, I've mentioned it over and over again, but the show has a lot that happens in each episode, and it's all out of order. But this makes it really easy to just pick up the show whenever you want and jump in at any point. Again, they get you caught up to speed with anything important for you to know to properly enjoy what's happening that week. I thought it was very nice to have both, like, cinema verite style footage where it's just, like, them doing things and it's being recorded, and confessional based footage where they are speaking directly to us, to the cameras, and telling us and explaining things that are going on. I saw in some more of the production interviews that the Osbourne family got really, really comfortable with the cameras being around. So honestly, I would 100% believe that most of the stuff we saw them doing and how they were acting is just how they are. I know some of the stuff was censored. Both the kids, I believe, were drinking and doing drugs at this time. Don't quote me on Kelly for that. And they couldn't, like, show that on the camera. Although, as Jack points out in the basement tapes, it was very interesting that at one point they're, like, out at a 21 and over club, and both Kelly and Jack are in the club. And it's just, like, in the show. But it's nice to have both. You know, sometimes when you put people on camera, or they're aware that they're being recorded or watched, they're going to self-edit, they're going to alter how they present themselves, and kind of make themselves into a particular characterization that they would prefer to be known as or presented as. The Osbournes don't really care for that. It's nice, you know, it's real, it's fresh, especially nowadays when so much of these shows that are docuseries are heavily, like, scripted or produced, I would say, in a way where, like, you watch The Real Housewives, and Kathy is like, not as dumb as she plays up to be. She's definitely, like, playing that as, like, a character on the show. But here, it's just everyone is as they are, which is very nice. In the basement tapes as well, which is a very, like, if you've watched the show and you're a fan of the show, you're a fan of the Osbournes, and even the other things they've done, later shows and later adventures they've been on, the basement tapes is very nice to watch because it's 2024, so it's some of the last stuff that we see Ozzy in, you know, prior to his passing earlier in 2025. And it's the family, you know, coming together. Kelly keeps calling it therapy, which I find very funny. And just watching the show and talking about it and talking about their life and their experiences, both in the show, but also just, like, in general. During one of these episodes, Jack makes a very, like, astute point about what this show did for them, which is something I always ask in every episode of this podcast. What do these reality shows do for the people who star in them? Who are their focus? And in this one, of course, it, like, gives them a lot of exposure. Not that they needed more. But Jack particularly pointed out, like, the difference for them in their, like, lived experience while, like, before the show even was an idea, then during filming of the show, and then when the show actually aired. And he makes this comparison. It was like, before the show, their family was Ozzy the musician, SHARON the manager, and 2 teenage kids. After the show, they were the Osbournes from TV, right? I saw some things about later in the future. I think this may have been after season 2. Ozzy at one point was stopped at, like, a Taco Bell, and by the time he had, like, tried to leave the Taco Bell, it was swarmed with, like, fans. And not just fans because of his music, but fans because of the show. And Ozzy autographed every single fan's thing that they wanted autographed in that particular event. But, you know, it's interesting to think about, like, especially the kids, like, who was Jack, who was Kelly before this show, and then now they're rising to prominence because of this show. And they have their own goals. Jack, over the course of a few episodes, really starts talking about wanting to work in the music business, following his parents, and he wants his own record label. And he starts trying to, like, lay the groundwork to make that happen over the course of this what we're shown in this first season. But other than that, you know, they're just kids, right? Kids of celebrities, but they're just kids. And being in the show now makes them reality TV stars before we really had a concept of what that is. Something we do... So I'm trained to be a social scientist. I've learned how to use different research methods to learn and make conclusions about people and groups of people based on what I observe and how I interact with those people. And so one of the things we do in a lot of social science is we take a lot of observations and we condense them down into kind of a concrete and concise description of what we saw. And how do we use this to describe the experience of particular individuals or groups, like I mentioned. This show itself is also that, which is part of the reason I, like, love to think about this show, and I could probably rant about it for however long, but I will spare that for you for now. We've got 3 other seasons to cover in the future that I can use to talk about this. But, this show, they had thousands of hours, and what the producers and the editors wanted to do here was make it into something entertaining. What they wanted to sell you and what they wanted to convey to you is that, yes, this is Ozzy Osbourne, this is the Prince of Darkness, this is his family, but they have the same problems as every other American family. And you know what? That's funny. And we're going to show you how funny it is and how entertaining this family is. But again, also, they still have the same problems. They got to deal with the dog peeing on the carpet. They got to deal with the kids not wanting to go to school. Just because their dad is a famous musician doesn't make anything necessarily different. And that's like the main central thesis. And what they're doing is they're taking all this footage and they're figuring out, how do we condense this down to actually sell that idea? So when you have this like continuous stream of a very different, like a cut up montage of Ozzy dealing with the dogs, right? That's being selected and put together in a very specific way to give you that very specific idea. And it works really, really well here, I think. And this is the same thing we do often, like I said, in social science. Part of why I do this podcast and why I love doing it. I didn't talk about this at the top of the episode, but I guess I'll bring it up now because I've been kind of like, when do I talk about this? Ozzy is part of Black Sabbath, which is like a heavy metal band. The theme for this show is like a jazzy big band theme. All of the visual aesthetic for like the intro sequence, and sometimes when they have scene change cards, which they don't do all the time, but like the title cards and everything, it's this like 1950s, 1960s, mid-century modern kind of like pastiche laid over it, or aesthetic laid on top of it. The stuff that you would see in like old print and TV and magazine ads for like borax or a fondue kit back in those decades. And kind of the whole and all those ads would have like a picture of like your conventional nuclear American family, right? And they're using that, of course, to contrast with the Osbournes. And be like, well, this is like what the picturesque American family at one point was in like Americana lore. And here's the Osbourne family with their box full of devil head decor and their crucifixes everywhere. And they're running around with knives. And they're all saying fuck off to each other all the time, right? And it's supposed to make you do this kind of juxtaposition and this contrast and be like, wow, this is like really wild. This isn't anything like that picturesque family. But then when you watch the show, there's another layer here of the show telling you, hey, actually they are, though. This family is no different than any others. They can have an argument at the dinner table during a holiday that blows up and causes one of them to leave. They can have a dispute with their neighbors just like anyone else would. Now, do they go to the extent of throwing food over their fence into their neighbor's yard? Yes, and that's what makes them the Osbournes. But they're still just an American family, which is really funny to say because they're also from the UK. And I kind of just put that in my brain like together as I said that out loud. I was like, wait a minute, they're English. But this is showing them they're like an American family, which is its own very interesting like sub-thesis point about the culture of family structure, I guess. I'll have to think about that one. But, the show does a really good job, and I love that kind of contrast with the aesthetics. They play the big band music and jazzy music throughout the show, especially when they're doing like montages, and it's honestly like really nice to listen to. I do like that kind of music. And it's very fun to listen to, again, juxtaposed with whatever chaos is happening on screen underneath it. That's all I have to say for season 1. I'm excited to watch the other seasons. This show had 4 seasons total. It aired between 2002 and 2005. Season 1, this first one had 10 episodes. The next season has 20, so I'm going to have to start getting through those. And then the third and fourth had 10 episodes each. But I am excited to continue to watch this show and see how it develops and see what I want to say about future episodes. I know that things get a little heavier sometimes in these upcoming seasons. Minor spoilers, particularly SHARON Osbourne had a battle with colon cancer that made its way, that was happening during the filming of season 2, that SHARON said, let's leave it in, and I'll talk about that in a future episode of the pod. Things get a little heavier, a little more real, but again, it's showing, every family has to deal with that sometimes, and that's what this show is trying to tell you. Go watch The Osbournes. I cannot recommend this show enough if you're a reality TV person. Even if you're not a reality TV person, this may make you start to become one. Just enjoying watching them and seeing the hijinks go down. And there was so much stuff that I didn't even include in the recap, like Kelly losing Ozzy's credit card and trying to find it. But you can watch it on Amazon Prime, I believe, and maybe some other places, but both it and the Basement Tapes are on Amazon Prime. So you can watch the show, and then you can watch the Osbourne family reacting to the show and discussing it and talking about themselves, and seeing them all grown up. You can also see Jack call out everyone. That's his role on the Basement Tapes, is to be the realest of them. But thank you for listening to this episode that I've worked really hard to keep under an hour for the first time. Well, not the first time, but most of mine average over an hour. Thank you for listening. Please like, rate, share this podcast with your friends. You can follow the pod on Instagram for updates to see what I'm watching currently, working on next, as well as announcements about the show on Instagram at The Recap Episode. You can also subscribe on YouTube at The Recap Episode Pod, where all of these episodes are uploaded. And in the future, other special content will make its way there as well. Again, thanks so much for listening. And until next time, I guess I'll be riding that crazy train.